Welcome into the Big Little Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Previty. That's Andrew Greig. LeBron James said, "Keep my son's name out of your mouth" to Stephen A. Smith. And is Donovan Mitchell better than Jason Tatum if he wins a ring and a Finals MVP? We talk about all of that and NFL free agency. That's where we're going to start. Andrew, biggest releases.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of them. Joey Bosa, Aaron Rodgers, obviously you kind of think that he was already, it was kind of a set in stone that he was going to leave the Jets, but just a lot of them. I'll start with Joey Bosa. Obviously, one of the Chargers, like all-time players. I don't know that anyone's going to debate that. He's been with them for such an extended period of time, has made multiple Pro Bowls, has been an all-pro player at some point. Obviously, injuries kind of derailed his career towards the back end of it, but one of a line of great Chargers and just a great overall player. There's a lot of rumors surrounding him. Is he going to go to join his brother in San Francisco? Where is he going to go? I think that'd probably be the best destination for him, kind of just team up with his brother for the late stages of his career. I don't really see him going anywhere else. And I don't know how many people need a defensive end like Joey Bosa at this point, and like how many teams want to spend a lot of money on a Joey Bosa. I think he'd kind of like opt into like a veteran minimum type of deal if he were to go anywhere. But I just don't know how many teams really need a Joey Bosa. So his situation is really interesting to me, just because like there's the prospect of him joining up with his brother, but a couple of teams are probably on the market for him as well. So definitely
the 49ers. I like you throwing out the Niners. I've seen that. Obviously, they're looking for somebody who's probably a little bit more healthier.
Mm-hmm.
So not somebody who could just sit on their IR, but I definitely could see him potentially going to the Niners. I mean, I'm sure he wants to win more games. I think it's interesting what the Chargers are doing right now. They're kind of salary cap strapped on their defense. I think they want to pay Mac, or they're just trying to figure out who exactly they want to pay. They had a great year last year. I believe they were the number one scoring defense in the NFL last season.
Yep.
So they can kind of afford to retool, but I don't think they want to lose him. I think he could go to the Niners. I think that would be a good spot.
Yeah, I there's no real debate there. I don't see how
They're
many
the betting favorites, I believe.
Yeah, I don't really see how many other teams are going to be interested in his market and how many teams really need him. But it'll be interesting. I think the Niners are definitely the favorite to land him, and then there's a couple other teams that are like maybe a little bit a ways away. But Joey Bosa, really good player, really good career. Just like never stayed healthy for an extended period of time, which is super unfortunate. But injuries are part of the game.
Yeah. So let's move to another free agent, Davante Adams. Obviously was traded midseason to the Jets. They were trying to make the playoffs at that point, but it was probably just way too far gone. He came on later in the season. He'll be 33 years old in December. What are we thinking about his movement?
Yeah, I don't
think he goes wherever Rodgers goes. I think that's
I do.
really
yeah. I think that they're like genuinely just good friends and want to like maybe finish out their careers together. Obviously, you had when Aaron Rodgers was first finishing out his time at Green Bay, they kind of like walked off the field. Well, actually, that is like just not accurate. That was completely different receiver. But who am I thinking of that like walked off the field with Aaron Rodgers for like the last time in Green Bay when they lost to the Lions?
Wilson?
Like in Green Bay.
Oh, in Green Bay. Oh, Jude, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I just remember they lost the Lions and like their playoff hopes were dashed, and like he just like walked off the field with like one of his old receivers. It's like somebody he played with for like a really long period of time, but that's besides the point. I think Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers go the same place personally. Maybe the Raiders. There's a couple of teams like within like those top 6 draft picks that all need a quarterback. Could add like adding an extra receiver definitely wouldn't hurt them. Maybe the Giants could be in that market. I think the Raiders are definitely like I was just saying, are one of the teams to definitely look out for both Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers. It'd be really funny if he like went back to the Raiders if like after getting traded from them just last season. But there are homecomings. Dwight Howard did it for the Lakers, so I mean we'll see. I think Davante Adams is still like a really good receiver though, and on a team where he was the number 2 option behind Garrett Wilson, he had multiple games where he went over 100 yards. He's still a great player, just and with a quarterback who is kind of towards the tail end of his career and isn't playing as well as he could be. So Davante Adams, definitely an interesting situation. Whoever gets him, I think they get like a solid wide receiver too at this point in his career.
Yeah, I definitely think they're that any team that picks him up is going to get some good production. And depending on where they're at, they want to potentially bring their offense to the next level. I think a good landing spot is the Chargers, and that's why I don't 100% buy into Devontae Adams going wherever Aaron Rodgers goes. I think he could find a good spot, whether that's with the Chargers, maybe even, like you said, the Giants, maybe the Patriots. So one of those teams that are really looking to either shake up their offense or bring it to the next level. And I just don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to be a New York Giant. Like, I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not.
To that end, I also think that Devontae Adams has a lot more buyers than Aaron Rodgers does at this point in his career. So he has a lot of different options and where he can go. Anyone can really use an extra wide receiver. Not everyone needs a quarterback. So I can see where you're coming from that perspective. Definitely Aaron Rodgers, like his market is probably those teams that are kind of rebuilding or don't have a quarterback, where Devontae Adams can kind of go wherever he wants. But it'd be cool to see them finish off their careers. I'm not a big fan of Aaron Rodgers, but like they've always been a good story from their such a long history of playing in Green Bay and then meeting back up with the Jets.
So practically 2 hours, I believe, after the news broke that Tyler Lockett was going to be released, DK Metcalf proceeded to ask for a trade. So now the Seattle Seahawks are essentially met with the decision to retool, get younger, or to continue their push behind Geno Smith, or their win now plan over the next couple of years. Initial thoughts on that? I mean, I think DK Metcalf is probably a second or a third out there on the trade market.
If I'm the Seattle Seahawks, I trade away Geno Smith to a team that needs a quarterback, completely say, F it, the season's going to go down the drain. Let Jackson Smith and Jigba be one of your pieces that you want to hold on for a long period of time, not rebuild around him, because who's rebuilding around a wide receiver. But if I'm the Seahawks, their ceiling, they've already met it with Geno Smith. I think that the playoffs, being a wild card team, is the ceiling for that team. Obviously, they were competitive in the NFC West last year, but that team isn't winning a championship, and I think that front office knows it. So maybe go ahead, tank this year, and then look for one of the better draft picks in the next coming drafts, and kind of just retool that whole organization. I don't think that there's any higher that they're getting with them. I don't think that anyone's out there claiming that Geno Smith is going to win them a championship.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think anybody is thinking that Geno Smith is at all the answer at quarterback either. I think they're just trying to kind of find a bridge to the next guy. And Geno Smith earned that contract that he's at right now. But I did go through the list of the top 10 highest paid players in the NFL. They were all quarterbacks. It makes sense. That's the market. And Geno Smith was on that list. He had no business being on that list. He played well last season, but just had too many turnovers as well. So I don't really want to crap on Geno Smith too much. But yeah, this team isn't going anywhere. And if you release Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf asks to be traded and you move him in the offseason, that's two of your biggest weapons for a quarterback that you want to be better. Just doesn't make sense, right? It works against each other. You got to move on. You have to find out your direction as a franchise.
And when you look at Geno Smith, it's kind of just like, where do you really rank him in this little, obviously he's one of the top 10 biggest cap hits, but overall as a quarterback, where are you putting him? Maybe in the top 12, top 13, and by top 12, top 13, literally in the bottom 12 or 30, would be the end of that list. So there's just so many other guys that and he had a resurgence in his career, but you can only go so far with Geno Smith, unfortunately. So I just don't think that the Seahawks have any business doing another year of him. I think that this past year was the final, let's try to run it back with Geno Smith. And now that DK Metcalf's probably gone and Tyler Lockett's gone, they have no business trying to rebuild around Geno.
I agree. So there's been a lot of signings, big moves, players staying, and then players going. Who's at the top of your list?
Yeah, so there's a long list, right?
Yes.
And I think T. Higgins,
we shortened it a little bit.
Yeah, T. Higgins is definitely one of those players, just because I think the whole Bengals situation is so interesting. You lose a bunch of guys like Trey Hendrickson. Obviously, that defense was terrible last year. Then the Bengals just have a little bit of a crazy situation going for them with the fact that their offense was so good last year. Joe Burrow has an MVP caliber season. If they have if their win-loss record is any better, he'd be in that conversation. Their offense was definitely not the reason they lost a bunch of games last year. Their defense was consistently so bad. And then you lose pieces on the defense. You keep a guy like T. Higgins, but you have to franchise tag him. He wants a bigger contract. That whole situation with him staying in the Bengals, just that whole Bengals situation is so interesting to me because they can be one of the best teams in the NFL consistently. They're one of the only teams that have beaten the Chiefs in the playoffs, at least from the AFC side. And they can stack up with legitimately anybody. I think that it was a little bit overblown last year. Everyone was like, "Oh, you don't want to see them in the playoffs." Like they still would have been the 7th seed and would have had to gone on the road 3 times to make the Super Bowl. But like that team dynamic is just so interesting to me. And I think that keeping a piece like T. Higgins is huge because you have him and Jamar Chase. People can't show too much love one way or the other, and they're both great receivers, but that defense needs to get figured out from the Bengals point of view. So that's like kind of that whole situation is kind of like my biggest part of free agency right now.
Yeah, I like the T. Higgins move as well. I think that certainly solidifies a lot for the organization. I'm going to go with Saquon Barkley. I think that if there was ever a player deserving of a fat contract, that I don't even care if it ages well. I don't even care about the position, being a running back, age, whatever. Pay that man whatever he's asking and don't even think twice about it. That man is Saquon Barkley, if there was ever a player, and he has earned it. Won a championship now with the Philadelphia Eagles and is the heart and soul, in my opinion, along with Jalen Hurts, because they got plenty of heart and souls on that team. That was a great team. You don't just have one leader on a Super Bowl team, but he has certainly solidified himself within that community, within that team, and that is their identity. I'm very happy that, and I'm to see that he is, I believe, now the highest paid running back.
Yeah, he
ever.
is.
Because,
Yeah.
it gets to that point where if you're the highest paid running back today, you're the highest paid running back ever. So.
Yeah, every time the contracts renew, I feel like highest paid today just means highest paid ever. But I completely agree on the Saquon Barkley front. And also, I think it makes sense from the Eagles' point of view, too. You only give him an extra 2 years on his contract. It's not like they're extending him for 4 or 5 years. Like, obviously, there's a steep decline in running backs play when they start reaching like a certain amount of carries or a certain age. So I think the fact that they're only giving him an extra 2 years makes sense for the Eagles. And also, like, he's the best running back in the NFL, so he deserves that contract. Obviously, like you have guys like Derrick Henry who are right there with him, but between those, he is the best out of any running back, and he deserves to be paid like it. So happy for him.
Yeah. So there's a couple other guys before we get into potential predictions for where some of the other players are going to go. Joe Thuney and Deebo Samuel, Trey Hendrickson. Will he still be on the Bengals? So let's run through those as I said them. We'll start with Joe Thuney first.
I think the Joe Thuney move is really interesting just because of the fact that the Super Bowl went as poorly as it did. It's kind of a remake of the Tampa Bay Super Bowl where it felt like Patrick Mahomes was rushed in the pocket every single down. Obviously, part of that is the fact that the Eagles' defensive line is so good, but not everyone had that problem in the playoffs where they played them. Obviously, the Rams did a really good job of protecting Matthew Stafford, and just throughout the playoffs, felt like everyone had more time besides Mahomes. So it wasn't really a problem you saw during the regular season. They were able to get out of a lot of close wins without it being an issue, but you had to move around a lot of guys, and then you trade away one of your best pieces on your offensive line. So on the other side, you look at the Bears, and I think it makes complete sense. Get a new head coach. You have a second-year quarterback going into the next season. It just makes a lot of sense to keep him stable in the pocket. You look at last year, and it felt like it didn't feel like Caleb Williams said that he was like he just felt a little bit uneasy in the pocket. He was always kind of like trying to make things happen. And you saw that with like a lot of the plays where he's scrambling out of the pocket, had to make a lot of like off script plays. So getting a guy like Joe Thuney, a rock on the offensive line, I think they'll probably draft well in the offensive line as well. I think that's a huge move for the Bears and for the Chiefs. They're definitely gonna have to look either in free agency or through the draft for somebody to replace him, because that's going to be a big loss in an offensive line that was already a little bit shaky towards the end of last year.
Yeah, it might be crazy, but I think that the Chiefs might end up drafting like 4 offensive linemen in this draft because they are going to have to redo that entire line. And for the Bears, you pretty much said everything that I could possibly say. They're building around Caleb Williams. How do you do that? Well, you start with the offensive line first, in my opinion. Step aside all the weapons you could potentially get, the running backs, the receivers, and they obviously want to still build their defense. You want to build a complete football team, but you start with that offensive line because you want him to be healthy and you don't want him to retire early, feel like he needs to leave, or just get crippled by injuries. So great move. A lot of people have been comparing it to the Panthers move, like last year, getting a new coach, trying to bring Bryce Young along in that way and building around the offensive line. I think the Bears are in a better position than the Panthers even were to start last year. So that's already a great go at it. So Debo Samuel.
Debo Samuel, I like interesting to say the least. The
Yeah.
Commanders definitely need a wide receiver too. Can Debo Samuel be that guy? Obviously, he's coming off not that far removed from being the wide receiver one on a really, really good Super Bowl team. Not obviously not Super Bowl winning, but like
Yeah.
a Super Bowl, like the team that reached the Super Bowl. You know what I'm trying to say. Debo Samuel was one of the main guys on that team, and he's definitely a little bit removed from being that type of player, but alongside Jaden Daniels and that the rest of that receiving core, I think that they could make even more noise than they did last year. How much more noise could that possibly be? They made the NFC Championship last year. They just needed a second guy. It felt like a lot of the time Jaden Daniels was kind of just doing it by himself. So getting the second guy for alongside him, and obviously their other wide receivers is going to be great for them. So I mean, we'll see how that goes. I don't really have any crazy thoughts on that. The Commanders overachieved last year, so I don't know how much that really moves the needle from them past the NFC Championship game. I think that the Eagles are still right there, and you have like a lot of contenders in the NFC. So I mean, we'll see how that goes.
This reminds me a lot of like the Diggs move to Houston.
Yeah.
Like CJ Stroud was coming off of the rookie year, and everybody was like, yo, he's the next great one. And he had a little bit of a sophomore slump this year. And they were kind of saying that this marriage was going to be really, really good. I think it could be a very similar thing with Debo and Jaden Daniels. I don't think that Daniels is going to have a sophomore slump, at least to the amount that CJ Stroud had. But I definitely think just be careful. But it's a good swing. It's a good try. And it's certainly an aggressive move. They only gave up a 5th-round pick. So I like it. And also, I am very glad to not hear any more storylines about how Debo Samuel does not want to play for the 49ers. Goodness gracious. That got so old so quick, and it just dragged out. Felt like it was going on forever. But last in the biggest signings / moves so far, Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, we harped on it a little bit with T. Higgins earlier.
Yeah.
Trey Hendrickson is going to be a huge loss for the Bengals on defense. They're going to have to draft defense, like almost not exclusively, but definitely like look into defense either in free agency or through the draft, because Trey Hendrickson is going to be a big loss for them. Obviously, they're allowing him to seek a trade, so probably not on the team next year. And I just think in a team that was either the worst scoring defense or very close to it last year, it's another big loss, and you kind of just don't want to see that if you're a Bengals fan. There's a lot to not love on that defense, and Trey Hendrickson was one of the few bright spots. So
yeah, the Bengals situation scares me a little bit. It really does. I think that they could end up going into a place where they don't have enough players and they don't have enough cap room to make it work. And maybe they get something serious for Trey Hendrickson, and that's ends up being a very, big net positive for them. And they can build after that, or maybe they just try to retool, get younger, maybe get picks or something like that, and just try to build through the draft and hit on it that way. But they're in a very interesting spot. It's more so dependent on what they can get in the open market for him. Obviously, I believe the news that he was allowed to seek a trade came out yesterday. So we'll see. There's going to be a lengthy process potentially for this. So we'll just have to wait and see. All right, future moves. This morning, it was reported that the Minnesota Vikings wanted to build around Sam Darnold in the future. They were looking for a long-term contract. Now, I don't know the validity of those reports. I don't know exactly how long-term is long-term. Is it 3 years? Is it 2 and 1? Like, I don't know how long it is. Where does Sam Darnold end up?
before I even get into that, I think that's so interesting that they'd even report that, or reports are coming out that could be true. Because I feel like that almost reminds me of like a Trey Lance situation on the Niners, where you have like a veteran in front of him, and then how much does that mean that they believe in JJ McCarthy? I don't want to dive into that too much, but I just think that's interesting, because if you think that you have your guy behind like a quarterback, obviously JJ McCarthy had a season-ending injury, so you don't want to rush him back, and you don't want to. But how, like you were saying, how long-term is long-term? If you think you have that guy, I feel like you want to start to play him, and having Sam Darnold would be the opposite of that. Obviously, the Vikings had like one of the best seasons in their franchise's history, not the playoffs that they would have wanted, but just a really good regular season from them at 13-4 season. So there's only so much you can say about that team. It's like they obviously have great receivers, good offensive line, really good defense. So that team is just interesting to go like completely like off on a tangent on. But Sam Darnold, I think that there's a lot of interesting spots for him. Again, that little 1 through 6 range where, like in the draft, where there's a lot of teams that need a quarterback. I feel like any of those teams could really be in the mix for him. The Titans could maybe move down and try to get Darnold in the offseason. Like maybe the Raiders could be a possibility. The Giants obviously need a quarterback. Dable is trying to save his job. So any of those 3 spots, those are my main 3 between Las Vegas, Tennessee, and New York. Personally,
That
I
sounds terrible. That sounds terrible for Darnold.
for
I
Sam
don't see
Darnold.
why you would want to do that. Also Adam Schefter did say today that he believes a down low scenario is what?
I just think it's funny just because those teams are that does sound like a terrible spot for Sam Darnold, but
It sounds like it just simply wouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just putting yourself like, why would you want to leave? I'd rather be a backup quarterback on the Minnesota Vikings, making less than what I would make on the Tennessee Titans as a starting quarterback. Like I'm just saying, because he's already made so much money. At a certain point, you got to realize, like, hey, maybe the fit and the organization is the better spot. And certainly, if all people who should know this, it should be Sam Darnold, who started out at New York, right?
Yeah.
Like with the Jets. So he should know this, but we'll have to just see
I
what
think
he
he
ends up deciding or what the Vikings decide. I think it's more so a report coming from maybe the Darnold camp where they're like, hey, look, we're trying to work out a long-term deal with the Vikings. See, look, they want a long-term deal. I don't want to be a bridge quarterback, like for whatever team is looking out there for it too. Like I could also think that could be a report.
I think the Giants could be interesting. They obviously have Tyron Tracy, a really good running back. They have Malik Neighbors in there. Could possibly retool even more on the offense in the offseason. And then you put Sam Darnold at the helm. I don't I don't know if that sounds like that enticing for a lot of different organizations. If you look at any season before this season, you would probably decline that 10 times out of 10. But I mean, he showed a lot this season. He can make a lot of the throws if he has the supporting cast around him like he does in Minnesota. I think Brian Dable is still a really good offensive mind. So I think that could be one of the better spots, but Tennessee and Las Vegas are definitely interesting works.
Aaron Rodgers, the man of the hour. Or the man of the entire season, it seems like last 2 seasons.
Yep.
Man, he's just been clip farming. Where does he end up?
Okay, right. I don't want to keep reusing these teams, but I think that
It's the same market.
it is the same couple teams that need a quarterback. So I think that Tennessee could definitely be interesting spot for him. Like specifically, Tennessee is probably the place I'd want to harp on the most, just because I think that they'd be one of the teams that'd be willing to reach out on a bridge quarterback in a year that there is no solidified number 1 guy. Obviously, you have Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, but are they going to pan out? I'm a big Canes fan. I personally would love to see Cam Ward pan out in the NFL, but there aren't any surefire picks, it feels like, in this draft. So I could easily see Tennessee moving down and then taking one of Darnold or Rodgers. And I think Rodgers would be like a decent fit for them, especially if they were able to convince Devontae Adams to come to possibly try and do something with them too. I don't think the Titans would end up being a playoff team, and I think that would just be another lost bridge here. Kind of like, remember when the Colts were kind of just cycling through guys after Andrew Luck, where they went they had Joe Flacco on that team for a little bit. That could be a little bit of maybe an AFC, and the AFC South isn't all that deep either. So maybe they're like, hey, we could try to make a run with Aaron Rodgers. I could see them working themselves into that reasoning, but probably the Titans would be my look at spot, and then the Raiders have said they've shown interest. So one of those two probably.
You did mention the AFC South. I think a dark horse team could potentially be the Indianapolis Colts for Aaron Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that based off of everything that the GM has said, they want to bring in a veteran quarterback, or they want to bring in some competition for Anthony Richardson. They want to make him work for the starting job, and they want to just be able to challenge him. A guy that would definitely challenge him would be Aaron Rodgers. And if they think that their team is in that mode where they can make a run next year, and I mean, shoot, you can ask anybody in the NFL, they probably always think that the team can make a run. Maybe the Indianapolis Colts could go get Aaron Rodgers. I definitely could see it. I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility. We're throwing out teams like the Giants, the Raiders, the Titans. I mean, these are some pretty terrible landing spots realistically when you get down to it. I think the Colts would be a better spot. I mean, I just felt like with all the turmoil that they had last year, it could get fixed quickly.
Yeah, I just don't know how Aaron Rodgers would sit and what that would even look like from his perspective. He's not going anywhere to be the backup quarterback. So
I know, I'm not saying he was going to sit. He's
no,
just going
yeah,
to
but
win the job.
then that leaves you with an interesting situation with Anthony Richardson. Do you just close the case on him?
I think with them already being so open about how they want to go get another quarterback just to challenge him, or to say, hey, if he loses, whatever, F it, he lost. I think that they already know what they have in Anthony Richardson. They have a guy who they know is going to take either some time to finally get there within, I don't even know how long it would take, another season, or they're just going to be out and they're just going to move on. Because I think what happened last year left such a bad taste in their mouth that they don't want to stick around too much and have too much invested in to Anthony Richardson. All right, Chris Godwin. It is being reported that he could earn up to $25 million per year on the open market. I don't really buy that, to be honest with you. But where does he end up? Does he come? Is he a buck for life?
I think
No,
that
I don't think so.
I think he leaves the Bucks. I would love to see him on the Dolphins. That'd be great for me as a Dolphins fan. Definitely think there's some interesting spots. I don't think that he gets $25 million. He's coming off a season-ending injury. Obviously, he looks like almost that guy on the. You're more tapped into the Bucks than I am, but in the games that I watched, it felt like he was almost like leading the charge as the wide receiver one on that team toward like during the games that he was playing, a little bit over Mike Evans, which is like a flip of the script of what usually is. Mike Evans is always the number one guy on that team, but definitely some interesting like landing spots for him. What I was saying earlier with either like T Higgins, Debo, like any of the wide receivers that are like in that true like wide receiver 2 or just a good overall wide receiver. Anyone could really use one. Like there isn't a particular spot that like I would lean to more. Like that's why I kind of like said the Dolphins thing earlier. As a Dolphins fan, I would love to see him on the Dolphins. I wouldn't love him for the price tag, but there are so many teams that could use. The Jaguars could use an extra wide receiver. They're looking to maybe like retool behind BTR and like maybe somebody in the draft. They've been rumored to like maybe get Tedero McMillan. So like Chris Godwin could possibly fill that hole for the Jaguars. Obviously, Liam Cohen, offensive mind. Maybe he translates from Liam Cohen with him on the Bucks to the Jaguars. That could be a move. I don't have anywhere like particularly in mind, but anyone could really use a wide receiver like Chris Godwin and possibly a wide receiver 1 depending on where he goes. So,
I actually think the Jags option you threw out there was pretty good. Because I was just thinking about it the other day, and I was like, who exactly has Trevor Lawrence had to throw to? I mean, certainly the Jaguars have taken some swings, and they've tried to get him some weapons, but he hasn't really had a ton in his career. And I can see that connection with Cohen potentially being something that lures him in, and maybe they drop another bag on a wide receiver, and it's just Chris Godwin. But I agree. I think $25 million is too much, and you were definitely right about your assessment. Before he went down this season, he was that wide receiver 1. And I think that's why he's essentially earned a bag, despite tearing his ACL. So he'll get some money on the open market. Maybe it'll also be from a team like the Patriots that are just trying to get a receiver or something like that. Who knows? All right. A lot going on in the world of sports and sports media. Stephen A. Smith had an altercation with LeBron James, or like a little bit of like an argument that happened. Was it post game or was it after?
I think it was
before.
I'm pretty sure it was post game. I like don't know particularly. I just remember like seeing like it felt like there was like a lot of activity like on the court. Like when
you know what, you can intro this one. You can intro this. Lay the foundation for what happened here, because you know exactly what happened.
Sounds good. All right, do you want to just do like a moving on type of thing?
Yes.
Okay. So moving on into the NBA. Stephen A. Smith, obviously, in a little bit of hot water. They introed it on First Take today, where he had an interaction with LeBron James courtside after the game, or somewhere in the Lakers versus Knicks game yesterday, where he was apparently talking about the commentary that Stephen A. Smith does about his son. I feel like LeBron James isn't one of those guys who cares too much about what's being said about him in the media. Obviously, you have guys like Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith for years now that have kind of downgraded or kind of like said whatever about his play, but he draws it seems like LeBron James is drawing a line at his kids, and he had a very serious conversation with Stephen A. Smith. It wasn't a long-lasting one, but you saw the look that he was giving him. Obviously, Stephen A. Smith had a whole 3-minute section on First Take today where he explained that it was specifically about the interactions that he's been talking about with Bronny James and his probably the reason why he is a Los Angeles Laker, and everybody knows that. I think it's interesting that Stephen A. Smith had a quote today that was saying like essentially that he he grew up as a reporter, and the exact quote was, "When you're a journalist, you're not trying to make enemies, but you're also not getting paid to make friends," which is an interesting quote, but it's also realistic. You have to report like what you see happening, and the whole Bronny situation, like everyone on the world knows why he's a Los Angeles Laker. Like he's a Los Angeles Laker because his dad is a Los Angeles Laker, and his dad is the greatest player or second greatest player. I don't like really care to have that debate, but one of the top 2 greatest players in NBA history, and the Lakers with a 55 overall draft pick, 55th overall draft pick, we're always going to take Bronny James. So I think that situation.
Okay. Let me stop you. Let me stop you a little bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about exactly who is in the right here, though, because of course everybody is aware that LeBron James is one of the top players ever in the history of the game, and everybody's aware that Bronny James is very talented. But would he have been on the Lakers otherwise? Probably not. Probably not up there along with the in JJ Redick's inner circle, everything like that. Was it fair or foul for LeBron James to go up to Stephen A. Smith and act like he was going to get some sort of preferential treatment, or did Stephen A. Smith step out of line? And I think from a sports media perspective, we might be a little biased because obviously covering the Big 12 as a sideline reporter, and you cover baseball, we're both in sports media, and we understand kind of where Stephen A. Smith is coming from. But at the same time, it's like LeBron's like coming at him like not as a player, but as a parent. So I feel like that's where like the catch is when we're like assessing, was this even necessary? Because this completely just blew up. Like there was no need for any of this. I feel like this is just the constant circle of negative attention as well around Bronny, which is like, you could be a Nepo baby, but it always doesn't have to be about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the lines are definitely blurred on this because it feels like nobody has ever played to 40 the way LeBron James is playing, and no NBA players ever played with the Suns. So the lines are like a little bit blurred. I think that when talking about like Bronny, it's just interesting because LeBron is definitely hearing some of it. Bronny's definitely hearing some of it. So the fact, I think it's a little bit foul on LeBron James' part to kind of like step into like what Stephen A. Smith was saying on First Take today. He has LeBron's number. He could have done it in private or whatever, and he decided to do it in more public atmosphere where you're probably gonna get like everyone has a cell phone, everyone can record. You probably know that's gonna go. You're not thinking of it, but that's probably gonna hit social media. There's just a better way to do it. I think that it's just interesting because there's no other scenario where you can really point to where this is like even like remotely similar. And even just when discussing Bronny James, there's a line to it when doing it on ESPN because some players are watching, people are hearing it. So it's just in my opinion, it's just interesting. I don't think it's super foul on LeBron James's part, but he could have just done it in a more private manner.
My thing is, I definitely would never be in the business of telling people like how to raise their kids or anything like that. But I just think that it really only brought negative attention to Bronny. And we started another conversation about why he's on the Lakers. And we started another conversation about why he doesn't deserve to be where he's at. Whenever it's like, well, Bronny, maybe he doesn't deserve to be in the NBA right now, but he was playing very well in the G League. And he's an extremely talented player who also had like a major heart issue when he was in college. And he was highly recruited. The guy is established, and he's very good. Yet we're still talking about this when Stephen A., in my opinion, I think is right in the sense that it probably should have been done in private. I get, Stephen A.'s initial thing where he's talking about it on air is obviously not private. So this whole thing is going to be public the rest of the way. Well, that's just, maybe you don't want that, right? Like maybe you want to you take the high road in a sense and try to bring it back to the private area and text him and be like, hey, look, we got to cut that out, man to man, as a father, don't do that kind of thing. But also, who's surprised that he was going to talk about it today on First Take? If you're going to talk to him the night before, a weekday, on a Friday, he's going to talk about it the next day on his show. So I'm not really surprised about that. And I don't think that him talking about it on his show was foul either. I just think LeBron probably had better intentions. And I think if it was just done privately, it probably would have got across a lot better.
Yep. I completely agree. There's not much more that I have on that really. I just think it's interesting because it could have just been handled a little bit better from LeBron's perspective, just walking up to Stephen A. Smith and kind of calling him out. You could have there's just other ways to do it, but I can kind of understand where he's coming from too. It's his son, and you just hear so much from so many different people about this and this and that. So So like Bronny is making a name for himself, and he's trying to establish himself in the G League, and I completely respect that. So I can see where LeBron is kind of like, is it really necessary to keep on piling on? But just could have been maybe handled a little bit better.
All right, let's move on to a thing that I proposed to you the other day. I said, if Donovan Mitchell and the Cavs win a championship and Donovan Mitchell is the finals MVP, I gave you a list of players that I thought that he is at least in the conversation for, or we should have a talk about it, how we discuss legacies of players. And you disagreed with some of them. And I said, like, I'll give you some time before we talk about it because this is really interesting. Now, before we get into it, I did want to always mention, I believe there's a quote from Phil Jackson that said, the team that gets to 40 wins without double-digit losses is a true championship contending team. The Cavs are like 52 and like what, 11 or 10 or something ridiculous. That was like maybe their record like the other day ago. This team is definitely for real. Whether or not they get through the Celtics and win against whatever team comes out of the Western Conference in the finals is, going to remain to be seen. But if Donovan Mitchell gets that ring, raises that finals MVP trophy, is he better than Jason Tatum?
No.
I don't think so either.
Pretty
but he's got something that Jason Tatum doesn't have. That's a finals MVP.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting argument just because Jason Tatum was the leader of that team, is the leader of that team, is the best player on that team. He just didn't have the better final series, and even that was debatable. So like it wasn't like a surefire thing that Jaylen Brown was even going to get that finals MVP. So I just can't see it. I think that Jason Tatum has had the better overall career, has more All-NBA selections, has more All-Star selections. Just everything about Jason Tatum's career has been better than Donovan Mitchell's to this point. So I can't put.
I agree with that. Like, I don't think that you're wrong, and I think Jason Tatum's been more established, especially in the playoffs, as a true leader of a franchise. But like, you got to think though, like with a ring that puts players in a completely different light. So as we continue, let's remember that. So you brought up that Jason Tatum was better than Jaylen Brown. Well, Jaylen Brown has a ring and a finals MVP. I understand. I'm not putting a ton of weight on these finals MVPs. I get it. It's only 5, 6, 7 games, of a sample size. When we look at Donovan Mitchell with a ring and a finals MVP, is he better than Jaylen Brown with a ring and a finals MVP? I think so. I think at that point, yes, because Donovan Mitchell would have had to have been the undisputed guy, right? Like he's putting up 40-point games, 30-point games, a memorable shot. When we think back to the playoff run, we have to have a moment. Like Steph Curry in that first run's got the deli, like just putting him in a blender, like making him go to the hospital essentially, right? In the finals. He's got all those great moments too, like leading up to it in the first couple rounds of the Western Conference playoffs. I'd imagine Donovan Mitchell would have something like that, right? So yeah. I think legacy-wise, all time, he would probably then jump Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, I could see that. I had like a little bit of a pushback when you first introduced this subject to me, but I think I'm starting to come around on it a little bit more. Donovan Mitchell would probably have to be the guy on a team that is probably going to win 60 plus games this season. And just that whole like part of his legacy, I think kind of like it's debatable right now, I think. And like if you give him, or maybe it's not because he has the finals and the finals MVP, if we're putting a lot of weight on it, but if Donovan Mitchell also,
I do, yeah. I mean, I do still put a lot of weight on it. I just would love to see, like, if Donovan Mitchell, like in this Cavs team, were to make it to the finals or something, and then I know that Donovan Mitchell can lead a NBA basketball team that far and deep into the playoffs, then I could be like, okay, well, shoot, if you swap Jaylen Brown and Donovan Mitchell, I could see that. They're pretty comparable, and then you give Donovan Mitchell more time in the NBA to get more accolades. I believe the highest he's finished in MVP voting is 6. He's only got one All-NBA team. Like, okay, well, if he could get to that point where he starts stacking some of those, then he'd be better than Jaylen Brown without even having a ring or a finals MVP, right? As long as Jaylen Brown doesn't get any more. But all right, next player, Dirk Nowitzki. I think we're both on the same page here. No. Yeah. Dirk's got that MVP and that longevity. Mm-hmm. But he's only got one ring and one finals MVP. Okay. And that was kind of the making of this list, was guys who had one of those or maybe just one MVP, none of the other two.
Yeah, I think if you put a poll out, there's like all of like 2 people out of like 100 that would say Jaylen Brown, and they would both be diehard Celtics fans. Or not Jaylen Brown. Sorry.
You're probably right though about that, actually. Yeah, if you could be right, like otherwise Two.
Same thing with Donovan Mitchell, though. Excuse me, Donovan Mitchell. We're not talking about Jaylen Brown anymore. But if you put that same poll out for Donovan Mitchell versus Dirk Nowitzki, I think two diehard Cavs fans, maybe not even because Donovan Mitchell hasn't even been on that team for that long, but would probably hit the Donovan Mitchell button, and then all 98 other people would hit Dirk Nowitzki. His one ring is probably more valuable than any other ring in NBA history. That's coming from a Heat fan that was a big fan of that Heatles team. That it took so much out of them going down in that series, and Dirk essentially having to bring them back. That the aura around that whole ring is just like essentially unmatched.
Yeah,
and,
agreed.
yeah.
It would help Donovan Mitchell in this case if Dirk Nowitzki didn't have one of the most impressive rings in NBA history. And also, of course, Dirk does have an MVP, very long career. Maybe this becomes a conversation if Donovan Mitchell wins MVP, right, at some point in his career. But right now, of course not. Let's move on. Jimmy Butler. He doesn't have a finals MVP or a championship, but he's got 2 finals appearances as the number 1 guy on the team. And then obviously a pretty long career that seems to span a very, very long time, right? When did he come in the league? 2011 with the Bulls. So what do you think? Donovan Mitchell with a ring and a finals MVP, is he better than Jimmy Butler?
Career-wise, sure, I'll give it to him. I think that what he did with as a diehard Heat fan, like remembering those Heat teams where he was surrounded by Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin. Obviously, Bam was on that team, Tyler Hero, but Tyler Hero was injured for the second finals run. What he did with those Heat teams, I don't know that we've seen maybe since, like, I don't even know what to compare it to. Maybe a Dirk on that Mavs team. Obviously, Jimmy Butler didn't win the finals, but the carry job that he had to do, those 50-point games, those 40-point performances, but going from an 8 seed beating the number 1 seed. Obviously, in that series, Giannis was injured, but I think that the whole legacy behind Jimmy Butler is a little bit blurred with everything that's happening right now. As a Heat fan, I still respect everything that he did for the Heat. And I would maybe put Donovan Mitchell above him just a little bit, because of like career. If we're going career wise, I think that maybe you can make the argument that Jimmy Butler still has like a significant amount of all NBA.
He would have a higher peak than Jimmy Butler ever did. If you raise that Larry O'Brien as the best player on a championship team, you definitely have a higher peak than somebody who just didn't do that and who didn't win any MVPs. Jimmy Butler does not have like any regular season accolades like that. Like to the point where I could just say like, oh, maybe I'd give the edge to Donovan Mitchell. That one's one of the most obvious ones on this list, in my opinion. Like, off face value, it does seem like a little strong. But you got to remember, he would be winning these 16 postseason games this year. This team has won this season essentially start to finish if he were to win this championship. That's dominant stuff as the guy. Obviously, the Cavs team is a very good overall team, well-oiled machine, whatever. You're a diehard Heat fan. I got to throw that out.
Yeah, I mentioned it. I think if you put Jimmy Butler on this Cavs team, I don't think that they're significantly worse.
I do.
When he was making those runs, I don't think they're significantly worse.
Oh, well, yeah, that's fair.
So I put him over him just like career wise, because there are no really individual stats, but for what he did for those Heat teams in those playoffs was like unmatched for me. And obviously Heat bias, but even so, like I'll give the edge to Donovan Mitchell in this scenario, even though that was a very long-winded way of putting that. My fault.
Kyrie Irving.
Yes, yeah, Donovan Mitchell. I'm taking Donovan Mitchell. I think that like that's almost like the exact same scenario, except for the fact that that Kyrie Irving wasn't the leader of those teams that went to the finals.
Yeah, I think we would have a different perspective if we didn't see Kyrie Irving kind of try his own hand with the Celtics and then the Nets of being the number 1 guy. I think he's a 2. And I think that would kind of disqualify him. So I think we're on the same page.
Supporting cast in those teams that you mentioned, like the Celtics team, obviously still had Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and they were significantly younger, but those teams weren't bad at all. So he tried his hand at being the number 1 guy on really good teams, and it just didn't work out. So I think you'd put Donovan Mitchell over him.
Yeah, I think something that we forget about is kind of how that season ended too, right? Like, I believe they lost to the Bucks that year. Well, of course, now I say everybody forgets and I forget, but Kyrie Irving and the Boston Celtics did not get very far in the 1 year that they were supposed to after he said he was coming back. That was a big flame out. I think that hurt his legacy all time. All right, Klay Thompson, a guy with a ton of rings, no finals MVPs. 4 rings. I
lean Klay. I lean Klay just because the 4 rings. He's instrumental in that team. He's one of the almost said the greatest, one of the greatest shooters of all time. I lean Clay. I lean Clay.
I would say if you swap Donovan Mitchell and Klay Thompson, that Warriors team probably wouldn't win all of those championships. Like, honestly, like at
Agreed.
least the first one. At least the first one. But Klay Thompson didn't play well in that finals in 2015. But I question how good those Warriors teams
Would have
would have
been.
been
Yeah.
because Klay and Steph definitely worked. But taking that out and not into consideration, like just from a player perspective, if Donovan Mitchell were to get it, I think there's a conversation there. All time, Klay Thompson's going to be in a different air, just like some of the other greats that were on great teams. But I think he's going to end up being thought of more like a James Worthy kind of player that was like maybe like that third guy on those in like a dynasty. And I don't know if that's going to do him a solid when we start comparing him to guys who have like one ring, one Finals MVP. But
Yeah.
Anthony Davis,
I'm
huh?
sounding like a Donovan Mitchell hater here. I'm taking Anthony Davis. I like we had this was like a little bit of a spirited conversation when this first was when we first talked about this. But I just think that Anthony Davis, all he does defensively, he does have that finals. He does that have a finals win. He doesn't have a finals MVP because LeBron James is on that team. LeBron was always going to get it. But I think that just overall, he's a better player, has way more individual achievements, is one of the best defensive players of our generation. I don't put Donovan Mitchell ahead just because he has one more Finals MVP than him.
I think Anthony Davis is a very good player.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
But we have seen him on his own team, and the Pelicans couldn't get anywhere. And I get it, like whatever you want to say about that organization. I'm not going to hold it on against every single player if they can't make it to the finals, if they can't get deep into the playoffs, if the one time that they had a run, DeMarcus Cousins tears his Achilles, or like, Rondo crashes out. I don't even remember exactly how that season ended, but like I'm not going to hold it against those players if they can't make a run. Right? I get it. There are way too many factors that are out of their control. But in my opinion, Anthony Davis is a two. And I think that maybe my expectations when he was coming out of college were a little too high. He was supposed to be that next Tim Duncan. And I just don't think he's hit that. And if Donovan Mitchell gets this, then I don't know how you can put Donovan Mitchell under Anthony Davis all time.
But he's a two to who? He's a two to LeBron James. Everyone's a two to LeBron James. I think that that Cavaliers team is stacked from top to bottom right now. They like Darius Garland has taken another step in the right direction. Jared Allen is a really good player. Evan Mobley is really good on that team. Max Strus is kind of like doing really good things for that team. I think that Cavaliers team is really good, and obviously he would be the leader of that team. But Anthony Davis, in my opinion, is the better player. And at this point, if Donovan Mitchell sits down with only one Finals and one Finals MVP to his name, I'm taking Anthony Davis's career as well.
Andrew.
I just am.
Andrew, I don't know if I could go that far. We just argued about Kyrie Irving only
No,
having he was second. He didn't
and
have
if
the
you look at
Finals
Donovan
MVP.
Mitchell, first of all, he hasn't even won this ring. This is a hypothetical, and
That's the
obviously
whole
this
point.
is
That's
under
the whole point of this, though.
under
It's
the
like we must grade properly if it happens.
This is
Luke,
under the
should I remind you of the Phil Jackson quote? 40 wins, less than 10 losses. That's a real
sure,
championship team.
sure, yes, and that's a part of the team in general. That's not all of Donovan Mitchell, and I
Well,
think
of course not.
okay, all right. Well, okay. Before he gets to the Cavs, before the season happens, right? But if you just look at it, if you look at this same scenario preseason, I think that the whole like vision behind this is just completely messed up because you look at Donovan Mitchell on those Jazz teams, what he like made it to the conference semifinals a couple of times, and he was the leader on those teams, and those teams weren't all that great. Like, and he had to carry a lot of those teams, but their careers up until this point were pretty similar, except for the fact that now Anthony Davis goes and is a two behind LeBron James, and is one of the best twos that LeBron has ever had, if not the best two LeBron has ever had. He's like
No,
I
not
don't know
better than D Wade though.
when he was playing with him.
At least not those first 2 years. But yeah, I agree. Yes, for longevity and how long, yes, he would be the best too.
Okay,
But
yeah.
I
So
think D Wade had a higher peak even in those first 2 years.
I think that being LeBron James's best two ever is more significant than being the one on a one season one.
No, that's too much for me. I
I
can't get on that. I
okay,
can't get
all
on
right.
that. I mean, I
Me
respect Scottie Pippen for being the two, but he had 6 rings. Like, we're also still just talking about one ring. Like, we're still talking about, like, I get LeBron James is doing all of this and he's 40, but he's been on the Lakers now for like with AD or,
is it
before
wait,
AD just got traded for like 5 years. They had a lot of time to get it done.
Is Anthony Davis a better player than Donovan Mitchell right now? Just answer that question.
No.
Or like career
Because
wise.
he's never healthy too. That has to be
Yeah,
also in this conversation. I don't want to move the goalpost, but I'm just saying, like, look, yes, Anthony Davis is obviously all world defensively. He's a great player, but now that he's injured for the Dallas Mavericks and Kyrie Irving's out, and that franchise has no hope, but they still have him. Imagine if the Dallas Mavericks had Donovan Mitchell. Wouldn't you think that they had more hope? Well, I know it's laughable, but if they win a championship and he gets this finals MVP, that's
sure.
the whole point of this conversation.
They would
Like,
definitely okay. Yeah, no. I completely understand all that. They definitely would have more hope because Anthony Davis isn't even playing right now.
but
But
he never plays. He's never healthy.
no,
He's never healthy his entire career.
okay, yeah.
Pretty
And
much.
even so, he still has more regular season accolades than Donovan Mitchell.
We're still working on it. We're still working on it. Me and D Mitch, bro. I'm in
Okay.
his corner. We're talking about it. I told him, I was like, you got to hit the game marks because Anthony Davis ain't hitting the game marks. So you'll be okay. Also, what accolades does Anthony Davis have that Donovan Mitchell can't possibly get?
All NBA or All NBA defensive team.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, yeah, I thought you were gonna try to say you got a defensive player of the year. I was like, no. But yeah, okay, he can't get all defensive team, but whatever. Neither can James Harden, Luka Doncic. Like, there's like plenty of guys in the NBA who've never even sniffed a defensive team. Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, like those guys are not going to all defensive teams. But you can still make all. His main goal is to make an All NBA team, like a real one, not just All
He's done
NBA
that
second
how
team. He
many
made like
times?
4 or 5 years ago, huh?
Yeah, and he's done that. Donovan Mitchell has done that how many times?
Once.
Okay.
I'm just saying we're gonna get. Also, how many? Well, if he were to win this championship ring, how many rings would Anthony Davis have that he was the best player on the team for? 0. That's the whole point of this conversation. Let's move on because you make a good point. You make a good point, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying if you were to win this, we look at these players differently.
You weigh championships and finals MVPs just a little bit more than I do, and I respect that, and we can.
Well, how could you not? And I'm not even trying to be like that ring culture guy. Like, oh my god, like these guys got rings, so they're automatically better than you. But like, yeah, to an extent.
I can't on this team just because he is such a good supporting cast around him. I don't know, like they play different roles, so I don't know if you put Anthony Davis on this cast team and he's more injury prone. So I don't know if you put Anthony Davis. I won't go that far to say if you put Anthony Davis on this cast team, they're doing as well. They play completely different positions, but Anthony Davis is like Anthony Davis is the better player in my opinion, and he literally would. The only thing that would separate them from in this hypothetical would be one Finals MVP, and I think the rest of his individual accolades have like bolster him a little bit far. And I'm not saying it's a drastic. It's not like Anthony Davis is like top 30 all time, and Donovan Mitchell is down there at like 50. That's not what I'm saying. Like it'd be close, but I'm thinking Anthony Davis, and we can agree to disagree.
You know what? I respect that. All right, Allen Iverson. That's the last one. You almost convinced me. No, honestly, you've got me slowing down a little bit because he ran into that great Lakers team and had an MVP and probably would have gotten a Finals MVP if the 76ers would have won. Definitely would have gotten a Finals MVP if the 76ers would have won. They had no supporting cast. I think it's a toss-up coin flip. It just depends on what you like. But Allen Iverson didn't have that longevity that you might like, so Donovan Mitchell might be able to catch up in that regard too.
Yeah. I'll keep it brief. I like it. I like AI. And again, this sounds like I'm just choosing everybody over Donovan Mitchell. I like Donovan Mitchell. He great player, right? But I just like AI a little bit more. He never had any help around him, and he still made that final. Like obviously, don't want to talk about that finals team, but had that all-time speech given after his MVP. Like I just like Allen Iverson a little bit more, and maybe that's just a preference thing, and bringing a Finals MVP doesn't change all that much for me, just because Allen Iverson never in his career had the supporting cast that Donovan Mitchell currently has.
This makes me feel like I'm indoctrinated into ring culture, and I don't like this. And it feels like a KD subtweet is coming for me while I don't know basketball, but I get it. You have to be careful of that. I just feel like when I think about Donovan Mitchell winning this championship in 3.5 months or whatever, I see D Wade when he won his first chip with the Heat kind of thing. And I see that as maybe being his legacy and kind of giving him a runway to make some jumps all time. I think it's a fun conversation. What?
All right. I just want to, in that hypothetical, I think that'd probably be the best one. No, D Wade or Donovan Mitchell.
I think, D Wade before the LeBron era, I think would be the comp. So, like,
Yeah,
those years after, but he was really close to
yeah.
winning MVP. I thought he was almost close to getting a scoring title. I don't know if he did end up getting a scoring title. I'd have to double check that. But he almost like averaged 30 points or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that would be a good comp, but I think honestly, those 2 rings with LeBron definitely also bolstered D Wade. I think we just like
Yeah.
1000% know that D Wade's a winner, one of the most unselfish, selfless players, unselfish players of all time, along with Steph Curry. So I think
Yeah,
that
I
helped
walk that
him,
back. It's not even, like, relatively
but
comparable.
but career, but it's a good comp as
Like,
yeah, during
LeBron.
those first like 6-7 years of D Wade's career, I think
Yeah.
it makes sense, and that's the way I was thinking. But always fun talking a little bit about the NBA. All
Alright.
right, let's get into the trivia that we have
Moving
for today.
on,
Or no, no,
nice.
no. Before we go to the trivia, let's do the speak now, forever hold your peace.
Okay.
All right, you can go.
Sounds good. So my speak now or forever hold your peace for this week will be on UFC 313. I personally am one of the I my career in sports media so far has been hosting one of the shows on Hitting the Field Network here at University of Central Florida, and the show that I currently host is called HTF Bets. I wouldn't recommend watching the Surefire Picks of the Week segment if you want specific bets, but I do have a pick in UFC 313 this weekend in the Ankalaev versus Pereira fight, one of the main events, so the most exciting fight on the card, and I have the over 2.5 rounds at -160. I think that these two are great fighters. Ankalaev hasn't lost a fight in years. He holds a 22-2 record. Pereira is the best striker and one of the best pound for pound fighters in all of the UFC right now. I think that these two like duke it out, and I don't see a world in which one of them, like obviously both of them have knockout power, but I don't see either of them going like knocking each other out before the first 2 rounds end. So all you have to do is make it to the third round, and I think they can do it. It's at minus
I'm
two.
gonna put the house on it. Okay.
Okay, great.
So my speak now, or forever hold your peace has to do with Stephen A. Smith and First Take. Today, I defended him and sports media when it meant you got to be honest about what you see. You're not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but you're still trying to give the best amount of reporting and journalism that you possibly can, and that will sometimes ruffle feathers. But right now, what First Take has become is definitely not something I think that a lot of people in sports media are very proud of. I believe it is one of the highest rated shows still, so the formula works, but a day after there were 8 NBA games, they talked about LeBron James's 2018 finals run. And I love me some LeBron James, some Glorious King content. But 2018 was 7 years ago. I almost said 6. It was 7 years ago. There was no need to talk about that. There was 2 Celtics players that had 40 points for the first time in NBA history on the same team in the same game. And there was a James Harden 50 ball on the Clippers. And we still didn't talk about it. We talked about LeBron James and the play that he had 7 years ago. It didn't make any sense. And it's clearly why, my opinion, First Take has lost its way and a bigger sign of general sports media. Just awful, awful week, I think, for First Take and like their own general like reputation. But all right, let's get into the trivia. You got something for me today, and I think I'll be fine. I think I'll be just fine.
Let's see. So Pat claims to know a lot about NFL history, likes a good trivia segment. So we have all of the quarterbacks ever drafted with the number 1 overall draft pick from the Super Bowl era on. Before that, it's just a little bit hard. There's some names that you probably just don't even recognize. So we'll start from 1970. Will be the first one all the way into current. You can go either up the ladder or down. It like preferably down, so it's easier to track for me. But whatever, however you want to do it. The only hint, you can choose whichever one you want. You can make it the team or the year, but I will that's all I'll give you, and you have 3 strikes. You can start whenever you want.
1970 scares me, so I'm so sorry. We're gonna have to go the other way. We're gonna
Yeah.
start with something. We're gonna start recent.
Okay.
So I think for my first selection, I'm just gonna go with. I wanted to start at the very, very top. Okay, give me Caleb Williams.
Okay.
Give me Bryce Young.
Yep.
Give me Kyler Murray. I may have skipped a few years there.
Skip 2.
Yeah. Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
Hopefully I don't want to forget any of the players that are more recent. Let me just knock off a few others. Sam Bradford, Matthew Stafford.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
Peyton Manning. Jamarcus Russell. Tim Couch. Okay. Now we're Jameis Winston.
Mhm.
Jared Goff. There's one recent that I'm forgetting.
You are.
Yeah, there's one that's recent that I'm forgetting, and I don't want to move too far past it because I know I'm going to want to circle back to it. And then at that point, my brain might be fried. Let me knock off John Elway, though, really quick, too.
Okay. Your team, if you want it.
No, I don't want a team. It's too soon.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm just blanking on the name. It's so embarrassing, but I will get this in just a second. I'm rolling through every NFL team in my head right now. I know that I should be able to get this. This was in the 3-man draft, I believe, right? Where there were 3 quarterbacks that were taken off the board, one after the other. I don't remember, actually. Maybe that was a different one. But
it was like 3 to 5 picks.
Yeah, maybe that's what I was thinking. Shoot. We're talking probably
COVID 2020.
Okay. Yeah, shoot, maybe that's why I don't. Baker Mayfield. Wait, that's one of them, but I didn't say him earlier.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's one of them. So that's good though. I think I got like pretty much all of them since like Manning almost.
You've gotten everyone since 2015 except one.
Okay.
We've already talked about him today. Sorry, that's like an unnecessary hit.
We already talked about him today. Dude, why am I forgetting the 2020 first overall pick?
Loaded quarterback class.
Oh man, I don't know why I'm forgetting about like who this was.
Like, I want to give you more hints because you know it. Like
Joe Burrow.
There we go. Okay.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know why that took me a second. Okay. Yeah.
Right,
Burrow. All right. So years I got every quarterback.
2024, 2023, 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, 2016, 2015, and 2012 you've gotten so far.
Yeah. Okay. I got Andrew Luck. Okay. And then before that, my guesses were Sam Bradford and Matthew Stafford, but I might be missing one in that realm. Wow. 2010 and 2011. Who was drafting? 2010 and 2011. Oh, Cam Newton.
Yep.
And then I think 2010 was probably not anybody.
You already said it, Sam Bradford.
Oh, okay. He was 2010. Yeah, I got you. Okay. All right. So then I got Jamarcus Russell right before Matt Stafford. How far back am I going to go now?
2005 is your next one.
Jamarcus Russell was 2006?
7.
Oh, 2005. Shoot. Why am I? Oh, Eli Manning?
That's 2004.
Oh. Dang. Come on, Eli. I thought he was going to save me there. Thought he was going to save me. Wow. Did this guy pan out? Is he any good? I can't ask you that. I need to save these.
We want to save time a little bit too here.
Yeah.
No, not to the expectations.
Shoot. Okay. Kind of wish he had. Then I would have been able to get him.
Yeah, right.
What team?
The Niners.
Dang. Alex Smith.
There we go.
Oh, Rodgers. Should have been Rodgers. Okay. What do I got now?
You got 2004. You got 2003. You're down to 2002.
There was a quarterback taken with the number 1 overall pick in 2002.
This might be the first X for you.
Oh shoot.
Out of Fresno State.
Oh, David Carr.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You gave me. You gave me a hint there.
Here a little bit too. We're an hour and 3 minutes into this.
I know. This is crazy. We just did not expect to go this long. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
we'll for the next one we will be more specific. I think on the
NFL free
agency segment.
Yeah. Huh? I went a little long-winded on some of my takes there, but
I think I just stopped you on the the Brawny one, but
yeah.
All right. So what do I got? What do I got left?
You're at 2001.
There was a quarterback taken with the number 1 overall pick in 2001. I was really not expecting this many dudes.
Did pan out.
Huh?
Did pan out.
Oh, he did pan out. Okay. Mike Vick.
There we go.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
All right.
Some of those guys like Mike Vick, Stafford, I don't really remember them being number one overall picks.
Already got Tim Couch in 1999, 1998.
Manning.
There we go. 93.
93. Drew Bledsoe.
There we go.
Yeah.
90.
90. Wow. Okay. Shoot. At this point, I almost was going to give a name that I just didn't, that I thought was going to be right. I was going to say Vinny Testaverde, but like, I don't think that that's right.
87.
87? Okay. Okay.
You only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many have I gotten wrong?
None to this point.
There have been some shaky ones through this. Okay, let's try to get this. 1990. I get 3 hints through this entire thing, correct?
I thought I gave you 3 incorrect ones, but I'm giving you about 2 to 3 hints.
Okay.
Like,
all right, give me the team that drafted him.
Colts.
The Colts. It's not Harbaugh. It's the guy who threw the ball super hard. He would throw it super hard. I remember watching something on him. Like, and he didn't pan out, right? No. Oh, come back. We're gonna circle back to 1990. I've heard his name before. 89. Dang.
You might have Cowboys. You might have already said this.
Oh, Aikman. No, I did not. Yeah.
Okay. 87.
I should have known Aikman was on the team, huh? 87.
Yeah.
Testaverde.
There we go. Page just reloaded. Give me 2 seconds. 83. You already got John Elway. 75.
75. Yeah. Is it
the last 3, by the way, before like last 4, including the one you circle back to? But
okay. What's the team?
Falcons.
Oh, brother, I don't think I'm gonna be able to get this one. Go to the next one.
71. Patriots.
Who did the Patriots draft in 1971 to lead their 70s football team? I don't know. Who's after that? 1970? What team?
Steelers. You got this one.
Bradshaw?
There we go.
Wow, he was the number 1 overall pick?
Yes, sir. So you have 71, 75, and 90. And the teams are 1990 were the Colts, 1975 were the Falcons, and 1971 the Patriots.
I'm not even going to keep this too long, man. I have no idea.
Okay.
Who are they?
That'll be your 3, I guess. And we can close up the list like that. Jeff George in 1990.
Jeff George. 2 first names.
Yep.
Come on, I could have just rolled the dice and got that one.
Steve Bartkowski,
okay.
1995 to the Falcons, and 1971 Jim Plunkett to the New England Patriots.
Oh, Plunkett. Okay. Hey, won a Super Bowl with the Raiders.
And that's your trivia.
Hey, there's the trivia. All right, you know what, man? Send us home. That was embarrassing. I can't believe I wasn't able to complete that.
Yeah, I mean, another great episode of the Big Little Podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I mean, any final thoughts, Patrick?
Yeah, college football is falling apart, and I liked things better when it was just the BCS.
All right. Well, on that note, that has been the second episode of the Big Little Podcast. Thank you for joining us. For Patrick Previty, I'm Andrew Greig, and we'll see you next time.